We hope you enjoy this podcast. All our conversations are inspired by films we have selected to appear on SDG.vision. So go and take a look and be inspired by people and organisations who are making valuable contributions to the Sustainable Development Goals and making our world a better place for everybody to live. Now, sit back, enjoy, be inspired, and afterwards, go and take action.
Well, welcome again to the SDG Vision podcast, and today we're really thrilled to be joined by Ben Horrigan from Ride GMn. Hello, Ben.
Hi, Pierre.
Hi, great to meet you, and we're really grateful for you finding the time to come and talk to us, because you, like I think all your other colleagues at Ride GMn, are volunteers. You're volunteering your time, so thank you for that.
No worries at all.
One thing to begin with, Ride GMn. Now, the GM stands for
Greater Manchester.
Ah, I thought so. Yes, and presumably that's where you're speaking to us from today, is it?
Yeah, so I'm in Cheadle-Hulme, which is in the Stockport borough of Greater Manchester. It's one of 10 boroughs.
Smashing. Oh, well, that's terrific. The first thing I was going to ask you about, I looked at the website and the work that you do, and one thing that came up was the B network, and I imagine this is another Manchester local specific thing. And Ride GMn have something called the B Network Manifesto. And could you explain firstly what B Network is and what the B Network Manifesto is?
Yeah. So a little bit of context. So as I said, there's 10 boroughs in Greater Manchester. And then centrally, you've got the GMCA, or the Greater Manchester Combined Authority. And then you've got a central transport body called TFGM, or Transport for Greater Manchester, similar to TfL in London. And the B network is really their strategy for kind of improving and connecting all of the public transport and also active travel routes within Greater Manchester. But normally when people think of the B network, they do think of the public transport side, so buses and trams primarily. And the reason we've got an a B network manifesto is it's our 9 key asks for GMCA and TFGM for active travel in relation to public transport. So if you think about a public transport journey, think of a bus journey, for example, a chunk of that journey is going to be a pedestrian journey, more often than not, isn't it? Perhaps some of it's going to be a bike journey. And so what we're asking for is things like being able to cross the road quickly and safely to get to a bus stop, being able to take your bike on one of the trams that we have in Greater Manchester, things like that just help with those, what we would call a multimodal journey, where you're combining different modes of transport. Because the stronger the active travel elements are, the stronger the public transport network will be.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. And the first question I should have asked was really, what is Ride GMn and what was the inspiration behind it?
Sure. So a little bit of potted history. Kind of back in 2018, the GMCA kind of set out their, strategy for active travel, for improving the active travel routes within the city region. And around that same time, Ride GMn was set up by a group of volunteers as a way of kind of bringing together all of the individuals that were already campaigning for safer and more accessible walking and wheeling and cycling. So people were already doing this campaign work. Ride GMn was just about bringing people together. And we had this great strategy on offer from the people in power, essentially, in terms of where they were going to take active travel. But we needed a volunteer campaign group of ordinary people holding those in power to account, reminding them of the promises that they'd made and of their strategy, and also celebrating when they do good things, because that happens as well, and that's part of our job.
That makes sense. And with the B Network Manifesto, what progress has been made so far, Ben? Has much been achieved, or is it still early stages in terms of making improvements?
So the manifesto came out last year. There's 9 key asks on there, and we've kind of made key progress on 2 of them. So one of those is vulnerable road user training for bus drivers within the B network fleet. When I say vulnerable road user training, that's about training that helps bus drivers understand what being a pedestrian or being a cyclist is like. We've seen videos of bus drivers in Mexico City who, as part of their training, they sit on stationary bikes at the side of a road, and then someone will drive past them in a bus deliberately too close so that they feel what it might be like to be a cyclist being close past. So not necessarily that, because the risk assessment might get a bit complicated, but some kind of training like that for bus drivers in Greater Manchester. And that's something that Andy Burnham, the Greater Manchester Mayor, has confirmed will happen. We've not got a timescale for that yet, so we're sort of pushing for more specifics, but he has said that one will happen. The other one is bikes on trams, which was not only part of the manifesto, but has been something that campaigners in Greater Manchester have been asking for about 20 years now. And finally, this year, there's been a trial scheme of bikes on trams. And again, we're sort of pushing for a wider rollout of that because we don't see any reason why that couldn't already be happening. We're used to taking bikes on trains. There's no real reason why bikes can't go on trams as well. And again, it's about connecting up different modes of transport to make things more practical. I guess it's to make active travel and sustainable travel a more practical, attractive option rather than driving being the default.
Yeah, I mean, that's important, isn't it? Because often the sort of the barrier that drivers have to actually getting out there on their bike or walking or whatever is, it's such a hassle. I can't get my bike on a tram. I can't do this. So it's cutting down all of those sort of barriers, really, I suppose, isn't it? It's a slow process in terms of achieving these wins. You have to be prepared to face yourself very many barriers and obstacles along the way. But it sounds to me as 2 out of 9 have been achieved so far. That's impressive.
Yeah, we count that as a big win because, as you say, it is slow progress. It's not easy. We tend to come up against some opposition from politicians, but also opposition from normal people who perhaps don't like change. Don't, for example, don't like the idea of the space in the road being reallocated so there's less space for drivers and more space for bikes and pedestrians. It's tricky, but we're working on it, and we are a growing movement of people who want to see change happen.
Fantastic. One of the saddest things, the things that saddens me most about a lot of weekdays is the dreaded school run and the madness of children being put into cars to be transported, sometimes a very short distance, to schools. Yeah. It saddens me because of the air pollution that causes this for other children, perhaps who are walking to school or cycling to school. But also I feel sorry for the children in the cars because they should be enjoying their journey to school, having fun scootering or bicycling or hopping, skipping, whatever, to school, as I did when I was a kid. So, all in all, it just seems to be a lose-lose, really, or, the sort of the school car run. Can you tell us about an initiative that you've got called School Streets?
Before we had a school street, it was quite busy and we could barely ever cross the road.
A few weeks before, a car pulled up in front of my leg and I almost got run over.
Since the school street, it's completely different. It just feels so calm. There's no noise of traffic. What's replacing the noise of traffic is birds, and I can hear children. They can see their friends from across the road, wave, and they can communicate. So it just really feels like a lot calmer, happier experience.
Well, my 2-year-old is now cycling with us. It's good practice to get the kids into. It's better for the environment. It just needs to feel safe. Everyone needs to feel safe doing it. And I think School Street has massively contributed to it here.
I walk along the road feeling happy because there's no cars coming. I think School Street should be more common since it helps children cross. And if you're like alone crossing, then you might feel unsafe, but with School Streets you'll feel a whole lot safer.
Every school should have a street because it would be more calm and quiet, not that much pollution.
There's a lot of cars flying past and it does feel kind of dangerous. One car might stop, but the other on the other side of the road might not, and it's really confusing.
We got the air quality monitor, and it told us how much air pollution there was, and it was dangerously high.
It can cause lots of diseases in our lungs, like lung cancer.
When there's a lot of cars and a lot of children sitting in cars, it affects their health in a lot of different ways, and it affects adult health as well. So physically, there's a lot of respiratory disease. It exacerbates allergies, and the respiratory diseases like asthma can even kill children and even adults. It also affects blood pressure and heart disease, so those are bad effects. The things that people don't always realise is that pollution affects children's development. If there's a lot of pollution from cars in particular, it slows their learning and slows their development, and it can contribute to the development of dementia in older people, all of which are things that most people would wish to avoid.
I've really got to know like loads of people in the community that I didn't think I'd get to know, and in the process we've managed to really make an impact.
We have had people who are quite stroppy. Some of the language, especially in front of some of the children, is not great. But I think as the trial has gone on, those incidents have lessened. I think more people are getting used to it and are expect it now, as opposed to when we first started and there was a lot of confusion.
The 6-month trial is coming to an end. I think the council should be doing everything they can to make it a reality, to be sustainable and remain for the future. I think I'd also say on that, the success that we've had here, I'd like to see that rolled out further, and I think we should have more schools that are accessing school streets, so the more that can be done, the better.
Councils need to invest into it, not just here in this area, but there's Rochdale, there's Tameside, Trafford, all the other boroughs. It's a must, not something that just happens, it's a need.
We do really want to celebrate the effort of all the volunteers. They've been absolutely amazing. Like, they've put so many hours in over so many days, and they just keep coming back over and over again. But we also recognise that it's not fair and it's not feasible if we have to rely on volunteers to be able to have a school street. So we'd like to put that call out to the council, to GMCA, to put more resources into School Street so that we can have more school streets made permanent and not dependent on just having volunteers to be able to do that.
A lot of those people who are driving on the school run probably want to walk or ride a bike, and they probably have a valid reason not to. We know that in Greater Manchester, 49% of people want to walk or wheel more, 40% of people want to cycle more. And as you say, for children, I think those figures would be higher in terms of kids that want to use active travel to get to school. But there will be something stopping those people, and it might be things that are out of our sphere of influence as campaigners. It might be how flexible their work is. It might be what the public transport links are like from school to work, because that's often something that's not really thought about. Or it might be that the alternatives to driving just don't feel safe to those people. And then the trouble is that you get into this kind of vicious cycle where it's more people are driving their kids to school, therefore it feels more dangerous to not drive, therefore more people feel they have to drive, and it just keeps going on like that. And it does feel, I mean, I've got 2 kids, it does feel anecdotally like more and more people are driving to the local primary school, which shouldn't really be the case. It doesn't make sense that many people are feeling the need to drive. On top of that, we've got a massive air pollution problem in Greater Manchester. So we know that at least 1,200 deaths each year, dirty air is a factor in that, air pollution is a factor in those deaths. School streets we do see as a big part of the answer, and that's something that we've been campaigning for years, and we're starting to see some real progress there. The idea of a school street is that the area around the school is closed to motor traffic during school drop-off and pick-up periods, with exceptions like residents and emergency vehicles and deliveries. So you see kind of great long convoys of kids riding along the road together. You see kids playing in the street. They're not worried about being hit by a car. They're not worried about dirty air. They're just getting on with their lives and using the space outside their school, which, of course, it should be theirs by right, surely. So they make a massive difference to kids' lives, but then they also get kids into the habit of travelling on their own steam, and then that spreads to other parts of their lives. So there's this massive knock-on effect where actually if you get travel to school right, then it will improve everything, and that's how we'll see big change happen.
The general concept is that by managing the traffic better, you can really encourage walking and cycling, making the roads much quieter, eliminating all rat running from the area, and discouraging quite a lot of short journeys by making driving ever so slightly more annoying because you have to go around the outside now.
A year ago, when the barriers weren't here, it was more like chaotic, like people were going like rattling around the roads up and down, and people were feeling unsafe. But now we get to school on a bike bus.
I think it's more safer because after we're all in a group. If you're not safe, you might not want to cycle.
And previously we used to cycle up Wilmslow Road on the protected cycleway. And we did have instances of there was a cyclist in front of us got knocked off, and my kids saw that, and one of my children knocked into a white van that was parked in the cycleway on Wilmslow Road. But now, because of the safer streets, it just feels a lot more enjoyable. We can chat with the kids, and I'm not constantly having to yell at them and going, watch out for that car, watch out for this car.
Everyone benefits from a scheme like this. It makes walking so much nicer, it makes cycling so much nicer, it encourages people to make better choices in terms of thinking about their car use. It will help with clean air just by reducing some of those shorter car journeys.
It's made it just a nicer area, I think, and when we're travelling at the weekend, say to swimming lessons and other events, it's nicer to get to.
If you come here in the evening and you see everybody who's walking out to go get the bus into town or something like that, they're going down the streets, they're in the middle of the road, they're not on the pavement, so it's much quieter in the roads now, and it makes it much better for everyone who's going out that way.
We have various tweaks that I hope will get made. What I really hope happens is that in due course the scheme gets made permanent and that it gets expanded to cover the rest of the neighbourhood to the south. And then hopefully the success of this scheme gets replicated in other areas.
The reason we contacted owWalk Ride was after seeing and putting a film on the channel. One of your films, I think it was Why I Swapped My Car for a Bike, I Guess I'm a Cyclist, which, it captures that very well, doesn't it? That what initially seemed like a bit of a chore to have to cycle to work actually becomes not only better for the environment for other people, in terms of the air that they breathe, but it becomes more enjoyable, a more enjoyable experience. It's about a chap called Gareth who takes his child on the back of a bike to school, and he enjoys it so much he's continuing to do it. And there is that thing that he's never seen himself as a cyclist before, but hey, I guess I am one, you know.
Exactly, yeah. I think he hadn't ridden a bike since he was a teenager, really. A big network of bike lanes has been built in the area where he lives. And he just thought, why am I not doing that? Why have I not been doing that this entire time? So it was that practical piece, but then he talked about seeing the city in a new light then. He started looking up at the buildings and enjoying the air around him, and it filters through to every part of your life. It's not just about transport, it's about quality of life, I guess, is the message that I'd always want to get across.
Before I knew it, 18 months has gone by, and I guess I'm a cyclist. Before I got a bike, I was driving to and from nursery really 8 times a week to pick up and drop off my daughter. And then I was driving into town and back twice a week, 4.5 miles each way. So I was doing quite a bit of driving. And I just remember sitting in traffic one day, and I'd been stuck there for 45 minutes. I really needed the loo. And I was about halfway through my journey, and I just thought there's got to be a better way. And then a cyclist flew past me in the newly built cycle lanes. So it was mainly a decision taken from a saving time perspective. I hadn't really cycled since I was a teenager, and so having the infrastructure just felt like a really easy way to dip my toe in the water. It felt really protected from the roads. It felt like, I wasn't suddenly going to be cut up by a car. It's just given me that kind of stepping stone to be able to get around without using my car. We used to have 2 cars, now we've got 1. That's hassle halved, effectively. So we've still got a car for, when we need it and if we want to do longer journeys. But the realization you don't need a car for most of the journeys you make, the sort of commitment to get out there for a few months has just carried on now. And before I knew it, 18 months has gone by, and I guess I'm a cyclist. And the trips I was doing to and from town, I know exactly how long it will take, and it doesn't really matter what events are on, what traffic's like. It will take me 24 minutes to get from my door to where I need to be. So, it's about half the time. Riding the bike has really helped me see the city I live in through a different lens. I know new routes to get where I'm going. I feel more connected to the world around me. To be honest, I look back at when I first moved up to Manchester nearly 20 years ago, and I wish I'd been cycling the whole time. I think of all the time I spent sat on the bus or sitting in traffic jams, and I'm just like, could have just been whizzing around on a bike and it would have been ace.
It's infrastructure as well, isn't it? It's about having cycling lanes so that people don't feel afraid of getting run over by a car all the time. And I think it's really interesting. I mean, as a full-time pedestrian myself, I've never driven. Yes, that has caused problems in my life, but overall, I know that I'm happier for it. I engage with my environment, my surroundings, so much more than I would do if I was in a car, for example. So I think these are important things to say to people, that actually it's more enjoyable, it's more healthy, and you engage with other people more as well.
Yeah, I think the kind of public health message is something that the government are starting to crack a little bit. They're starting to realise that actually there are savings for the NHS up for grabs if you get active travel right, and funding a protected bike lane seems expensive. It's going to cost millions. No, it's going to save millions more because of the health benefits on top of the fun element and the fitness element and the general quality of life.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And when I read a Guardian article, I think it was last year, we'll put a link to it below. Air pollution, of which, cars contribute a significant amount. kills up to 29 to 43,000 people in the UK every year.
Wow.
And let alone the other bad health impact short of death that people are experiencing. So it's an extraordinary thing that actually people aren't aware of it more. I guess it's one of those things where people just put it to the back of their mind. They may not be aware of it, but it's one of those things where they think
it's hard to necessarily see deaths and illnesses caused by dirty air.
Something invisible. Yeah,
it's invisible. Exactly. It's exactly that. It's not as in your face. So people maybe just aren't aware of it. But I'm pretty sure that people who have been touched directly by that will be aware of it and will be campaigning for it.
Sure, absolutely. And I was thrilled also to see your pedestrian manifesto as well. Could you tell us about it and what if there's been any successes with it and what your hopes for it are in the future?
Yes, the pedestrian part of things is interesting because I think a lot of pedestrians aren't necessarily aware of what their rights are. So if you think about things like crossing a side street as a pedestrian, the highway code says in the UK that you have the right to cross that road, that you have priority over cars who are turning into or out of that side street. But if I'm driving or if I'm riding a bike and I come to a side street, I'll stop to wait for pedestrians to cross, and then they'll stare at me thinking, "What are you doing?" Because either they don't know that rule in the highway code, or they do know it, but they're assuming that I don't. Because so many people don't know that. So they're thinking, well, I'm not going to walk out in front of this car because I'm expecting that rule to be broken. The other thing is pelican crossings. So we're so conditioned to get to a pelican crossing, press the button, and then politely and patiently wait for our turn to cross. Because of course the cars get to go first. Of course they have priority because it's always been that way, right? And we're just we're almost kind of brainwashed into just agreeing that cars are better than pedestrians. We're second-class citizens.
Yeah.
We're just going to wait our turn.
Yeah.
Which is why our pedestrian manifesto, again, it's a list of kind of key asks for making life easier and safer for pedestrians. And it includes things like painted zebra crossings, I should say, stripes, not actual zebras, across side roads to make it clear that pedestrians have priority to cross in those places. It doesn't need to be a full-on zebra crossing with Belisha beacons, but just a little bit of paint to indicate that the rules have changed and drivers need to give way. Another one is, as I mentioned, kind of traffic light control. So reducing waiting times at traffic lights, or even in some cases, as we've already seen in Greater Manchester, having lights that respond immediately. So you press the button and then the lights will change. They'll go amber and red for the cars, so you can cross not instantly but quickly. There's even some crossings in Greater Manchester that have sensors, so they can detect when someone's coming to cross the road, and then stop the cars at that point. So yeah, it's very much a work in progress in terms of the pedestrian manifesto.
Side roads, not something we give a lot of thought to really, but we have to negotiate a lot of them when we're getting to schools and to shops. Now, for those of us who are not so fleet of foot or maybe got kids in tow, it can be pretty daunting stepping out into the road and just hoping that drivers are going to stop. And that's why subconsciously a lot of us say, oh, I'll just jump in the car, or I'll run the kids to school. And that makes up 250 million journeys every year around here in a car that are less than a kilometre. Facing a health and climate crisis, it's never been more important to make people feel happy and able to walk instead of jumping in the car. And that's why, in the true Greater Manchester style of doing things differently, we're trialling side road zebras to try and change that. Here in Tameside, this is the first one of these in the UK, and it's hoped that the evidence this provides will give the UK what it needs to get in step with the rest of the world. Ultimately, you've got to choose for yourself, which would you prefer?
so one of the asks was around antisocial parking. We had a road in Salford in Greater Manchester that was notorious for the pavement being blocked by parked cars, and our local group there campaigned to get double yellow lines installed, and now that road is completely clear. So there are things like that that are easy fixes, but they still take councillors and local groups working together to get it done. Another one is in Stockport, so the borough that I live in. We've got this beautiful historic district, and we campaigned to pedestrianise that whole older part of town. And now it's this thriving, buzzing space with street parties and other events happening on it. And again, it's another one of those where you get these amazing side effects of introducing better active travel infrastructure, where the whole quality of life is improved. It's not just about transport.
Absolutely. And I mean, it is extraordinary. I mean, we accept it, as you say, because it seems normal to us, that these huge spaces, public spaces, are given over to cars. And there's a lovely bit on your website that says large portions of this public space is given over to vehicles with pedestrians kettled to one side. And I loved that phrase. I really loved it because that's what it feels like sometimes as a pedestrian. And going back to the school run, those poor unfortunates who are taking their children with prams or whatever to school often have to do so on very narrow pavements, worried about their children going into the road. So I think, you're right. I think it's important that we have this shift of awareness about what public space is, really. And we haven't even really talked about the noise pollution that cars and traffic cause.
That's interesting. Is that's never been a big part of what we've campaigned on, but it's worth considering. Yeah.
It really is. I mean, one of the few things I enjoyed about COVID was stepping out the first day, going to my allotment, and there was no traffic. There was no noise pollution. I could hear the birds. I could hear everything in the natural world, and it was joyous. It was lovely, So yeah, I think it is important. We've talked about politicians, and we've talked about how you engage with them. I'm wondering what your experience has been, really. I guess this is obviously at the Manchester sort of local and regional level.
Yeah, I mean, without wanting to get too much into the weeds of how Greater Manchester is set up, we've got that kind of central combined authority, and then we've got the 10 separate borough councils. So you have a central strategy, but then you've also got the individual councils with their own highways departments, their own officers, and their own way of doing things. And so because of that, we've had a mixed bag from the 10 different boroughs in terms of how receptive they are to us and to the change we want. A lot of councillors and officers do want the same things as us and work quite closely with us and value our input. Often we might get sent information about a new scheme before it even goes to public consultation, because that's how much they value our opinion on these things. And obviously they know that it's in their interests not to have a big sort of public uproar on their hands if these things go wrong. So the position that we kind of really want to be in is the critical friend to politicians. So we're not pushovers. We don't just kind of agree with everything they say. But we don't just kind of praise things for the sake of it. Yeah. But also we don't want to be so far the other way that we're pushing back against everything and they don't want to talk to us anymore. So it's trying to get that balance right is the tricky thing, I think. And it's not my area of expertise, but luckily we've got people within the owWalk Ride GMn steering group and wider membership who are amazing at the political side of things. But yeah, there's places where we really struggle because of either the personal views of politicians or because that area happens to be a very car-centric place and people are just happy with the status quo. They don't want things to change.
No, I think it's quite a nuanced thing, isn't it? I think, if push comes to shove, I suppose that you have to get out on the streets and demonstrate. But as you say, if you want to work with politicians and get, and be involved, then you have to do it in a patient and diplomatic way, I suppose. Yeah, no, that's interesting.
That's it.
And you said, you're all volunteers, I think, at owWalk Ride.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's an extraordinary thing. What inspires you, or what inspired you initially, and what continues to inspire you to give up your time to contribute?
Yeah, so you'd probably get a different answer depending on who you asked.
Yeah.
But the one thing to kind of make clear is that we've got this essential steering group of about 10 members who are rallying everyone together and setting the overall direction. But then really we're a network of lots of local groups with hundreds of active members. So they're all doing their bit where they live. And we're just trying to pull the whole piece together and make sure that everyone's on the same page and making use of the bigger numbers when we need to make more of a noise about something. And in terms of why we give up our time, we're all very passionate about seeing change happen, as you probably gathered, but all kind of for slightly different reasons. So you've got people who are more on the climate change side or the clean air side. You've got people who are just fed up of putting up with bad conditions on our roads and on our footpaths and our cycleways. You've got people like me who have kids and are worried about their safety. And then you've generally got a bit of a combination of all of those things. So the other thing is it's very, very energizing when we do achieve something and when changes happen as a result of our campaigning. So that alone is enough of a motivation to keep going. But yeah, we do work hard, and I feel like we very much punch above our weight as a voluntary organisation with no real funding.
I mean, that's extraordinary. Do you feel that attitudes are changing? I guess it's difficult to measure that, but in your day-to-day life, have you seen an improvement in the general public's attitude towards walking, cycling, and improving the infrastructure?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. That to an extent, the attitudes are already there, because, like I said, 49% of Greater Manchester residents want to walk or wheel more, 40% want to cycle more. It's just that something is stopping them. So, yeah, there is already, we know, a desire to have something better. It's just that I think people aren't necessarily aware of what that might be or how they can get it. So one thing we need to get better at is bringing people together who don't think of themselves as active travel campaigners, but who are walking or cycling every day and do want things to be better. There's a lot of very sort of different, very diverse communities in Greater Manchester who are allied to what we do, who we don't know about and need to get better at connecting with. So yeah, it'd be really interesting to hear from people who do similar work, either in active travel or in related things like clean air, climate change, road safety, health, sport. It covers all these different things.
Yeah, and on the sort of politicians that you've been working with, have you seen a change in attitude as well, perhaps, or is it too early to tell? Because as we say, these things take time.
Yeah, it's change of attitudes from politicians is tricky. That it's more likely that we would see fruitful relationships with people who already agreed with us, rather than necessarily changing someone's mind. So some people are very set in their ways, and there are cases where we just have to wait for, the next generation to come in and replace what was there before.
Sure. And I suppose that once you've demonstrated in partnership with a local council or a local school or whatever, once you've demonstrated how effective it can be, then that's easier for you to make your point, isn't it, really? It's easier for you to then approach those that are politicians that are perhaps not as sold on the idea. And but it's not necessarily a threat to anyone, but it brings huge benefits.
Yeah, exactly. So this is why things like storytelling and video content are really important to us, because we can take things like the interview with Gareth, living in a neighbourhood where they've put in infrastructure and it's changed his life, and then take that to another council or another area and say, look, this is what's possible. This is why you need to put this infrastructure in. And a really tricky thing to get across is that even if most people, or even if a lot of people say they don't want something, it might still benefit them, and they might just not realise it. And that's a really tricky thing politically to get across. In London, in Waltham Forest, there was a massive active travel scheme, which had quite a big pushback against it to start with. And I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but something like 40% of people were against the idea to start with. Once the scheme was completed and had been in place for a year or so, only 2% of people were against it because they saw the difference that it made. But the idea of it to start with was off-putting to them. But once they saw the actual outcome of that, they were happy with it. So sometimes people just need to be gently dragged along.
That's an interesting image. Yeah, but at a pedestrian pace, of course. Yeah,
yeah, of course. Yeah, but probably reword that in a way that would make more political sense. Yeah, this is why I'm not a councillor.
It makes absolute sense. No, it makes absolute sense. I was going to ask if there's any other walk ride groups outside of Manchester, or is there a network?
Yeah, the network is a strong term. I guess we are linked up with other similar campaign groups. So people like the London Cycling Campaign, that's their name, but they are an active travel campaign group. They do pedestrian related stuff as well. And we're I suppose, friends with them. They've shown us around the infrastructure in London, including Waltham Forest. We've shown them around Manchester, and they've given us a lot of advice. They're a more mature organisation, I guess, than us. They're a registered charity with funding, with staff. So they've given us a lot of advice on how we might move forward. And you've got similar groups in a lot of the main cities, definitely Cambridge, Bath, Oxford. The places you would associate more with cycling definitely have a group. The places you might not associate with cycling and active travel, I can't think off the top of my head, but there are a lot of them out there.
Would you be open to people, say somebody's looking at this in Aberdeen or Swansea or wherever, and they think, yeah, I'd love to really set that. Would you be open, Walk Ride, to actually lending your experience to them at all?
Of course, yeah. I think the more that we share knowledge and experience, the better it'll get for everyone. We're always happy to do that. Again, because we're volunteers, it is a time permitting thing, but usually when people ask things like that, we say yes.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. And considering you're all volunteers, that's no mean thing, really, I think. So how can, if people living in Manchester or sort of Greater Manchester area, how can they get involved with you?
Yeah, so people living in this area, or anyone really, can follow us on social media. We have a Discord server. That's where most of our campaigning happens, which people can join and sort of get involved in the conversation and find out what events are happening and what consultations we're responding to, that kind of thing. So that would be ideal for residents of the area.
What is a Discord server?
Sorry, good question. So yeah, we have a Discord server, which is a bit like a chat room. So it's an online space where people can come and send messages related to different topics. So like the different boroughs of Greater Manchester will each have a thread in the Discord where people can rally around the issues that are in that area and organise events, campaigns, consultation responses, that kind of thing. Does that make sense? So it's an online community.
Yeah, great. And how do they find that? On your website?
Everything's through the website. So on the website, there's a Get Involved tab, and then that's got links to socials, email newsletter, the Discord server, and also a link to donate to us as well. Because, as I say, we have no real funding other than occasional individual gifts.
That's incredible. And I wanted also to talk about your life outside of Walk Ride GM, because you're managing director of a media company called, is it Studio 91?
That's right, yeah, Studio 91 Media. And we're a B Corp video production company based in Manchester.
Yeah, I'm a nosy chap, and I looked at your website, and I was just the reason I'm mentioning, because I was so impressed that, I mean, you say that you're a values-led company, and that's just so refreshing to read that. And I was just amazed at how seriously you take that. Can you just sort of perhaps tell us how that values-led approach filters down in the way that you run your company?
Yeah, so in all sorts of ways, and I don't know how much you know about the B Corp process, but as part of that, you have to answer lots of questions about the different areas of your business. So when it comes to things like governance and staff and suppliers and environment, all these different things, and the idea is to score above a certain benchmark to show that you are hitting all of those things, or hitting as many of those things as you can to a very high standard.
Yeah.
And so for us, a lot of it is about the people that we work with. We work with loads of charities, loads of ethical and sustainable businesses. We don't generally have to say no to things to people coming with stuff that doesn't fit with our values, because people know who we are. As you say, it's front and centre of the website. So the inquiries that we get tend to automatically reflect that. People might be looking for a B Corp video production company specifically, or looking for a video production company that does work with charities. And so a lot of our clients find us that way, which is great for us. Also, it's the way we work with our staff. So there's a team of 3 of us, and we look after them. We're very transparent with things like how much money is coming into the business or not. Things like that. Being open with the way the business is run is a key part of running an ethical business.
Yeah, and the reason I ask it is because I think it's really important for businesses to be involved in the sustainable development goals, and for businesses to play a role. Often you see charities, not-for-profits, leading on sustainable development goals issues. But I was just really, really impressed to see how seriously you take it. Often you can see greenwashing and companies pretending that they're environmentally conscious or whatever. But when you really sort of investigate deeper, then it's pretty surface level stuff. But I can see that really does run throughout the various processes of your company. So I just wanted to congratulate you and really encourage other businesses to look at your website and to see how you do it. It's really impressive. Is there anything we've left out, Ben, that you would like to talk about in terms of WALK, Ride GMn, or indeed your company, your business? I was going to talk about the SDGs and which SDGs you hit as an organisation, and I think there's quite a few. We've talked about good health and well-being. That's SDG 3. I think also quality education, SDG 4, because you show through your videos and your written work, and that's educational. I think in terms of how beneficial. It can be. Other things, sustainable cities and communities, SDG 11, I think very much your work hits. And climate action, of course, SDG 13. If there's less emissions, there's less CO2 being pumped out. And partnership for the goals, SDG 17. I think you work in partnership with local authorities, with other people. I think that it's there's probably more if we really talked it through. But we'd just like to congratulate you really on your work. It's been fantastic, and if you've got any other films, we'd love to show them on the channel. So just send them to us. And is there a general email contact address that people can contact you by?
So it would just be hello@walkridegmn.org.uk.
That's terrific. Okay. Well, Ben, thank you very much indeed. It's been terrific talking with you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You might be seated quite far back on a long bike and your wheel is going to stick into the carriageway.
Now, if you enjoyed that, go and have a look at their film and many, many others on sdg.vision.